Hope everyone's off to a wonderful day. My name is Akram, and in today's episode, we're going to take the time to figure out how we can build a really nice animation for a hamburger menu using Framer Motion and Gatsby.js. Now, the Gatsby part isn't too complicated. We're going to be using it to create some dynamic page routing using the create pages method that comes with Gatsby. So it is a very simple process to get dynamic pages. In terms of the data, it is static data. So we're not going to be connected to a database or a CMS or anything like that. We're primarily focusing our efforts to create this hamburger menu that you see on the screen right now. The process behind it is it has these two panels that come up. It's a really cool animation. When you hover on it, it's pretty interactive, and it kind of calls for a bit of cool page transitions when you're jumping from route to route in your hamburger menu. Before I head out, make sure you leave a like and don't forget to subscribe, share it with friends and family, whoever's really interested in front end, and also leave a comment in terms of what you would like to see in the future. I am trying to kind of push the boundaries for this channel to create more high quality videos. And if you want to support the channel, I do have a Patreon link down below. So check that out. Take care, guys. Now, to get things started, I already have the starter branch cloned and it is right here on the screen. If we take a look at the localhost 8000 running the starter branch, you'll see that you have just the header, a little message that tells you to click on the menu button. And if you click on the menu button, nothing actually happens. I do have the final project on a Netlify hosting, so if we just go back home, I'll have this link in the description as the final product, so you could definitely just play around with it and mess with it if you want. But we're not focusing our efforts here. We're going to be starting on the starter branch. So again, make sure you head over to the GitHub repo and clone the starter so that we can get started. To break down the architecture real quick, what I do have is inside my source folder, I do have a components folder, which in the components folder just houses the different components we're going to build. Right now, there is a header.js, a layout.js, SEO.js, which this doesn't really matter to us all that much. This is just comes with Gatsby when you just get the Gatsby starter. If we close out of that, we do have Gatsby images. And for Gatsby images, I am using the Gatsby image. And specifically what I'm doing here is querying for 4 different images. And then at the bottom, dependent on the prop source we pass to our image, we're going to render out the different images. So this is just a quick way to render out 4 outcomes of a different image using the Gatsby image without needing to necessarily make several Gatsby image components. And we'll get to that later in the video. Outside of the component, we have a data, and this is just products.json file, and it's just going to house information related to our products. You could see that we have our New Balance, our Air Max off-whites. Typically, this will come from a database, or if you're hooking up to a CMS, this is where all the data is coming from. Holy shit, my voice. But we're just using a JSON file. We're not hooking anything up to a backend or anything like that. So this will just be dummy data for us. And then with our icons, we have icons.js, which is just returning a close icon as a React component. And then for our images, we just have our images where the shoes live, as well as our favicon. Finally, we do have pages, which is an index.js and a 404. Index.js is just returning that click on the menu button. And then for our styles, we have the app Sass, a normalized Sass, a variable Sass. And then for the components nested in our styles folder, we do have banner Sass and header Sass. We don't have any styles for our menu or our menu component built out yet. We'll do that together. So we'll close out of the styles folder. One thing I do want to mention is if we head over to our package.json and let's look for layout. So I did install the Gatsby plugin layout, and the Gatsby plugin layout pretty much just allows us to not need to reference the layout component in every single page we build. So you can see that if we open up index.js and then go to our components and open up layout.js, layout.js is wrapping our children, which would be everything inside of our pages folder. Typically, if you're not using the Gatsby layout plugin or the Gatsby plugin layout, whichever one it is, you'll then need to write layout as the parent, like so every single time you every single time you create a page, but using that plugin just allows us to avoid that, and it will wrap it in the Gatsby browser. You can also use kind of state within your Gatsby browser if you want, but just installing that plugin allows us to do it without needing to write layout every single time. So enough rambling, let's go ahead and actually get started. The very first thing we are going to do is we're going to set up the product page as well as the routing inside Gatsby node.js. So inside Gatsby node.js, this is where we'll kind of be able to create the products page as well as passing a parameter to the different titles or different names. So to that, what we're doing here is just using Gatsby node.js first. And what we're gonna do is write the following: exports.createPages. And we're gonna pass in a function with the following. So we'll pass actions is going to represent the create pages, and then make it an arrow function. And then we'll return the following. So for me to describe create pages real quick, pretty much Gatsby allows us to access different APIs, and one of the APIs is create pages. And what it does is it allows us to add pages within our pages folder without needing to create those pages. So reading the definition straight from the Gatsby website, it tells plugins to add pages. This extension point is called only after the initial sourcing and transformations of Node plus creation of the GraphQL schema are complete, so you can query your data in order to create pages. Pretty much as we're querying our data depending on the different data we have. Currently we have 4 endpoints. It will create pages based off those endpoints. So when you're creating a blog, you have blog posts. You don't create blog posts every single time you want to create a post. You create pages, or you pass this function to create those pages and pass in the dynamic data. So to continue on, if we want to query that data, we're not going to use GraphQL to query the data since we're just using static data that we have in our data folder. What I'll do is just require that data. So we'll do source data /product.json. And now this product's going to retrieve all of the data we have. And then next we're going to use a for each array method to create a new page for each individual data point or endpoint. So we'll use products.forEach, and then we'll just pass product and pass in an arrow function. And then here we'll pass the create pages. And inside create pages, we're going to pass different configuration options. And so the following would be this. The path that we're going to actually create for this will be /product and then /, and we'll use a template literal. We'll do product.id. Now this product.id is coming directly from our data, the products JSON. So the ID is just going to be kind of like our parameter or our URL. So we do have the dashes that represent kind of spaces. So that's going to be our path. Next, for our component, the component we're going to want to load or mount for each page is going to be the following. So we'll require .resolve, and we'll need to create sort of like a template. So we'll do source, we'll just call this templates /product.js. Finally, for our context, so that we can access the data, we'll just simply pass product, which is going to return the entire object for each of our endpoints. So we'll go ahead and save this. What we'll need to do next is actually build out the product page. So inside our source folder, we'll create a new folder and we'll call this templates. And inside templates, we'll create a new file and we'll call it product.js. Inside product.js, we'll write RAFCE, where we're going to create a component, and just make sure you capitalize product. Next, what we're going to do is just build out that product page real quick. So for our first div, we'll give it a class name of banner. And then inside banner, we'll give it a class name of inner-banner. And then inside of that, we'll give a container. And now additional to the container, we're going to give it a fluid class. Then we're going to have an H1 with the class name of main-headline. And inside main headline, what we'll do is we'll say hello for now. Let's save that. Let's go back to our project real quick. And then because we did edit that node file, the Gatsby node.js, we do need to restart the development process. So it does give us a alert to do that, and we can just hit OK. And I wonder if it restarts it by itself. Let's check out the console. Let's refresh. Okay, I guess it did. So what we could do is we could do localhost /, and I have this saved before. So we could do product /airmax90, and it gives us an error. It says it typically is an issue occurred building component for that path. Okay, and I wonder if it even restarted the development process. So we can manually restart real quick. Okay, so we did get an error. Products is not defined. And that's because in our Gatsby node, I created a variable for product, but then I am looping through products, which doesn't exist. So to fix the issue, what we'll need to do is just match the variable to what we call here. So it's products. Let's go ahead and write products. And another thing I'm looking at is the create pages. This should only say create page. So let's get rid of the two S's. Where we use create pages or create page, and then we actually call the function create page or the method. Let's actually fix that. So we're exports.create pages with an S, and then using create page is going to be singular and not create pages. So let's go ahead and get rid of those two S's as well as add an S to our products variable. Let's save that. And then if we head back to our browser, it will say that it needs to rebuild the development process. So we can say, okay. And then this should rebuild our project. I wonder if it's actually rebuilding though. I'm still getting that error. Okay, I guess you can just do it manually, because when it asks you to rebuild, you'll click rebuild and it'll give you like a message saying Gatsby is rebuilding or something like that. But it's not giving me that, so we'll just manually rebuild it. And then once this is done, we can just refresh the page that we're on. Okay, so it's done and I don't see any errors. Let's go back to our project and refresh. And then you can see that we are getting that hello message, which is perfect. And if we go to our product JSON and get a new ID, or sorry, we already have Air Max 90s. Let's do New Balance X90. You'll still get hello because that is just the default message that we're sending here. To change that and make it dynamic, what we'll do is we will then grab the page context, and then we can just kind of loop through the data that we pass through this, where's it at? Through this context. So what we'll do here is in product, we'll grab page context, and then inside of our components, we'll create a variable for product, and we'll set product equal to page context. And then if we want to make this dynamic now, what we'll do is write product.title, and then this will return the title for our different pages that we have. So we have Air Max 90, New Balance X90, and Air Max 97 Off-Whites. So now that we're returning the title should get updated here. And if we change this to the Air Max 90, it will be updated to Air Max 90. We'll want to do the image as well. So right here is where we're going to use that Gatsby image. So we'll say image source, and the source we're going to pass for our image is product.source, which product.source is going to return a number. If we remember here, the source is just 1, 2, 3, and that will then in the Gatsby image component return the different sources of the images that we have. So to use that, we'll do import image, and we'll import image from the following. So it's going to be in components, Gatsby images, and just an image. Oops. Let's go ahead and save that. And then if we take a look, you can see that we have our image in the background. I don't think it should be in the background. I think we're missing a div here, but you know what? I kind of like it in the background, I'm not gonna lie. If we switch it to New Balance X90, look at the New Balance X90s. You know what? I mean, after now that I'm rebuilding it for the tutorial, having it as a full background is actually pretty neat. We just might need to make up for the dark text or dark image, but I think we'll take a look at that towards the end to see if it looks better. But for now, what we'll do is create an image div and pass in the Gatsby image within that image div to adjust the widths and center it along our container. So we've got the pages built out, and then the different pages do work. So if we switch to the Yeezy 700 geoid, I think that's a geoid, I don't know. If we switch to that screen, you can see that it is picking up the different pages and it's building or creating those pages for us, which is perfect. So that's step 1 done. Step 2 was building out the product template, which we just did. So we've got step 1 done, which is setting up the routing in Gatsby Node.js. Step 2 would be build the product template pages. And the styles are already made, so we don't need to waste too much time on the styles. Next, we're going to build the menu as JSX as well as its styles. Then we'll transition over to toggling it and locking the background for when the menu is active. So let's go ahead and do that in part 2. So next, we're going to go ahead and build out the menu component as well as its styling. So let's focus on that. Now, one thing I do need to mention is this is not responsive. So if you're working on different screens, the layout might be a bit different. The idea here is just to learn how to use Framer Motion as well as Gatsby for its different page transitions. Don't worry too much on styling or responsiveness. If you want to do that, just spend some time there on your own. But to carry on, we'll go ahead and open up let's close these out. We'll go ahead and open up the components folder, and inside the components folder, we'll create a menu.js. Now inside menu.js, we'll do RAFCE so that we can create a React component. And then let's go ahead and capitalize menu. The very first div that we're going to create will be called projects. So the class name will say projects. Now inside projects, we have a menu title. So we'll create a div with the class name of menu title, and we'll call this products. And looking at this now, I wonder why I named projects and products. I think we should just call the top one products. I don't know. It's up to you, really. Content doesn't really matter right now. Next, what we're going to do is create a div with the class name of close, which will represent the close icon. And so inside the close icon, we are going to write a close component, and this close component is going to be coming from our icons folder. So to import that, we're going to do import close from, and then we'll go to components. Actually, it's not a components. / where is it at? Icons / icons. This will then bring in the close icon. Now, next, what we're working on is the menu itself with all the list items. So we'll say a class name with menu. Inside menu, we do have a container, and inside the container, we have a menu-inner. And let me close the console just to create more space for us. Now, inside the menu inner, what we're gonna have here is a unordered list. So we'll say UL, and now inside the unordered list, we'll have a list item. So each list item will represent an individual row. What I'm gonna do here is build out one list item, and then we'll loop in the data to build out the rest rather than needing to copy and paste 4 different times for our list items. So I'll go ahead and build the first one. So it's going to be a list item, and inside the list item, we'll have a link for our Gatsby link. Now the to prop for our Gatsby link is going to take us to this. So it's going to be /product / and then we'll use a template literal for our ID. But since we're not passing in ID just yet, I'll go ahead and just put an A, and we'll get back to that one here in a second once we start passing the data. Now inside the link, we're going to have a wrapper, and inside this wrapper, what we're going to do is first create that line that's going to be on the left and the line that's going to be on the right. And to better represent this, I think I should just pull up the site itself. If we open up the menu, what line is going to represent is these lines. So we have one on the right, and then we have one on the left. So you can see that they are going to receive different classes using Flexbox, and they'll be, they'll just look a bit different in terms of the widths. So we can define that as we build the styles. So the first one is going to be a class of line, and then we're going to pass it left so that we can kind of define it that it's going to be on the left side. Now, when it comes to animating, we are going to pass a class name of mask inside of it. And what mask is going to do is, let me close this and reopen it. Mask will give it that effect of it revealing. My God, I got in the way. But if you look at the lines, you can see that they are kind of revealing themselves, and it's not a width, right? The width is not going from 0 to 100. What's happening is that we have a mask overlay of a white box that's just changing its widths, revealing the line behind it. So that is what mask will represent. For now, we'll just pass in mask and not do anything to it right now, but when it comes to animating, we'll adjust. And I wonder if it might throw us off. We might need to comment this out. We'll just comment it out for now. Now, as a sibling to the line left, what we'll have is a title. And inside title, we have an H2, and we'll just pass in title for now. And like I mentioned regarding the mask on the line left, what you'll see is when we open this up, you can see the title going up, and it's not fading in as an opacity, but it's just like sliding up. So it does have a mask itself. So inside the H2, what I'm going to do is pass in a div with the class name of text. And this will kind of represent the text so that it could kind of go up while it's hiding behind the title and or H2. Now, as a sibling to our title, what we're going to have is a thumbnail. So we'll say thumbnail, and inside thumbnail, we'll pass in a Gatsby image. So we'll say image, and for now, our source will just be 1, and we'll update all this to be dynamic once we start mapping through the data. So thumbnail is going to represent the following, which is this right here. So this will just be thumbnail. And then when we hover, we have a floating image, which we'll build out in a second. Again, thumbnail is just the small images that is in our list item. So we're building thumbnail, we pass in an image here. Thumbnail will also get a mask. So what I'll do is create a mask and just comment that out when it comes time to animating. Now, as a sibling to our thumbnail, what we have is the floating image, which I just talked about. So we have floating dash image, and inside floating image, we also have a Gatsby image. So we're gonna have image source 1. Now, to finally top off everything inside our wrapper, we are going to have a line. We'll just copy the line that we built up here. The only difference here though is this is going to represent our right line. And we also want to add a right class for our mask itself. Perfect, so let's go ahead and save that. And then what we could do is let's display this in our layout. So if we switch over to our layout.js, underneath the header, we'll go ahead and import menu, and we'll import this from our menu. And then underneath header, we can just bring in menu like so. Now it's not going to look pretty at all. In fact, if we take a look, we do have an error which says link is not defined, image is not defined. And inside our menu.js, let's go ahead and define those. So we'll import link, and we'll import this from Gatsby. And then we also need to import image. I'll make a comment for Gatsby image. We'll import the following. So image will come from /components /Gatsby images /image. So let's take a look now. Okay, perfect. So you can see that we have the product header, the close button. We have the title, which says products. I think it's supposed to say something else, no? Oh yeah, the title right here. We'll switch the title to say Air Max. What is it, Air Max 90? I don't know what it is exactly. So we'll say that this is the title, this is the thumbnail, and then this is the floating image. So that is our menu right here. We'll start working on styles next. So let's go ahead and open up our styles folder. Inside the components, we'll create a new file, and we'll call this menu.scss. And then we also need to make sure we import that. So let's go ahead and import the following: /components /menu.scss. Don't forget to add the colon at the end. Okay, perfect. So let's go to menu SCSS and start working on the styles. Off the top, we do have products, which is our parent. And let me actually split this. So if we put these into two different screens, and then open up menu.js, we could start seeing, let's hit Command B to get rid of that on the left, but we could see how to actually start nesting. So products is the top parent, oopsie. And now inside products, we have the .close, and .close and menu title is actually going to get very similar styles. So we'll say .close and menu title. Menu title will be slightly different, so we'll pass in menu title by itself as well. So close and menu title will have similar styles, but then menu title would be a bit different. Now outside of those, but still being inside the product, we have a menu. And inside menu, we have menu-inner. Regarding our container, we do have the container defined within our app. So these are just default styles that I already have that we don't need to worry about. Let's close that. Now inside our menu-inner, we have an unordered list. Inside the unordered list, we have an li. And inside that, we have an a tag, which a tags represent the link. Next, we have a wrapper. Inside the wrapper, we have a title. And inside the title, we have an h2. Now, as a sibling to the title, but still being inside the wrapper, what we have next is a thumbnail. And now inside that thumbnail, we do have that mask, which we'll get to when we start animating. And as a sibling to that, we do have our image, which represents the Gatsby image. As a sibling to the thumbnail, what we have next is the floating image. So we have floating dash image. What we're moving on to is outside of the wrapper. Outside of this wrapper, what we're gonna do is work on our line. So we'll have a dot line. There's a lot that goes with this line, which I need to cover, but right now we'll just say dot mask, and we'll get to the styles in a sec. So go ahead and save that, and that is our entire schema. We'll go ahead and start styling now, starting at the very top of products. At the very top, we're going to set the position to a position of fixed. And what I'll do is get rid of the split screen because we don't need the left anymore, so we need to focus here. Position fixed, the height will be set to 100%. The width will be set to 100%. Our Z index is going to be set to 9. Our overflow will be hidden. And then our background is going to be white. Now you could use the variables that I have, or you could just use the hex codes. It's really up to you. So if we take a look at what it looks like now, that's not what it looks like. It looks like this. You can see the background is completely covered. We no longer see the header and that menu button. Z index 1000. What am I doing? Close. Okay, yeah. So we're working on the close in the menu title. This is very exaggerated. You don't need to set 1000. I'll set 1000 because I do want this to be the highest for our menu title and our close button, but it doesn't need to be that much. We can adjust it later. Our position will be set to absolute. Our color is going to be black. The top is going to be set to 3 rem. And for our rems, our default is 16 pixels. So when you're using rems, they're relative to whatever the HTML font size is. So if you're using 16 times 3, I'm not good at math. 48 or 52, 6 something. Right will be set to 5.8 rem, not 4, but 5.8 rem. Our display is going to be set to flex. We're going to align the items to center. And then the text transform, we're going to set this to an uppercase. Finally, we have the font size, which font size will be 8.75 rem, which this ultimately equals to around 14 pixels. And then we do have letter spacing, which our letter spacing is going to be 0.05 rem. And then our cursor, we'll set that to pointer. And then our SVG, what we'll do is nest the menu title within the SVG, or sorry, the close button within the SVG. And we'll give that a height of 30 pixels. The SVG is going to represent our close button. But if we take a look now, you can see on the top right, we have the X button as well as the products. So we'll adjust products to have it on the far left, which is our menu title. And that is why we have menu title right here to adjust that. So our top will be set to 3 rem. Our left will be 5.8 rem. And then our font size, we'll go ahead and set that to 1.4 rem and save that. So that's going to move it to the far left. And if you want to capitalize it, that's really up to you. I did realize I put text transform here, but we could get rid of that and it will be lowercase. Also, what do we need font size for the icon if we're defining the height? This is just sloppy code on my behalf. Perfect. So we've got the products as well as the X button laid out. Let's start focusing on everything else. Next, we can focus on the menu itself. The menu is going to receive a height of 100 viewport height. And then our menu inner will have a display set to flex. Our flex direction will be column. Our justify content will be center. We're aligning the items to center as well. And then we're giving it a padding of 8 rem off the top and 0 on the left and right. We also need to give it a height that will match the menu. So we could say 100% or 100 viewport height. I'll go ahead and say 100 viewport height. Now this will adjust it and add it some padding and center everything in the middle. Next we have our unordered list. We'll give this a width of 100% and we'll say display block. For our list items, we'll give this a position of relative, a width of 100%, as well as a height set to 115 pixels. Now I jump back and forth between pixels and rem. Typically, if we're talking about, I don't know, best practices, you might want to stick with one, but breaking rules is fun, so it doesn't really matter. Next we have the height, which the height of the A tag or the link is going to be 100%, which will ultimately equal the 100% of the height of 115 pixels. Now inside the wrapper, we also have a height of 100%. Our display will be set to flex. And what we're doing is aligning items to the bottom, so flex end. Let's save this and take a look. You can see that we have the air max aligned. The images are nowhere to be found, and that's because we need to define their heights, which we'll do in a minute. Next, we have the title. Now the title is going to receive a margin of 0 and 1 rem on the left and right. And then for our H2, we're going to give it an overflow of hidden, a margin of 0, because I do believe it comes default in the app Sass, giving a margin. Our font size, we're going to edit this to 4 rem. Our font weight will be set to 500. Let's save that. So it just increases the size bit, which looks good. Next, we can jump to our thumbnail. For our thumbnail, what we're doing is having a margin bottom of 1.4 rem. Our overflow will be set to hidden. Our position will be set to absolute. Our left will be 30 rem. Our width will be 7.6 rem. Oops. Our height will be set to 5 rem. We can skip the mask for now, but we can start working on the image. The image is going to have a position of absolute. Our width will be set to 100%, and our height will equal that, which is 100%. Finally, we'll just set a right of 0. Let's take a look now. And there's an issue. We forgot to add a colon at the end of width. So now we have our thumbnail laid out beautifully. Let's keep going. We don't need to stop. Next, we do have our floating image. Now the floating image isn't going to present itself unless we hover on the title that comes with animating, but we'll go ahead and display it here and then just hide it. So the pointer events on this one is going to be set to none. And the reason we're setting a pointer event of none is the following. If we look at our project here, you can see that if I hover off air max, then it stops the effect. Similarly to if I have pointer event disabled and I hover on the image, like if I go right too fast, or if we have different offsets, it will disable the hover. So we do also have a pointer events disabled or none on our cursor, just so that the hover effect doesn't go away. So you can see as I'm hovering on the image, that hover effect doesn't go away. Had I have pointer events disabled, it would just hide the image because we are not hovering on the text anymore, we're hovering on the image. I felt like that didn't even make any sense when I explained it, but deal with it. Width is going to be set to 24 rem on this. The position will be set to absolute. Our background size is going to be set to cover. Our background position will be set to 50%. Our Z index is going to be set to 99. And then we have an overflow of hidden. And honestly, looking at this, I don't think we need background size, cover, or background position. Initially, when I had built this, I had laid out the image to kind of have to be a background, but I think since we're using Gatsby image, I've since then changed it to where we have an image in our thumbnail. So I honestly don't think we need to even write background size, background image. I think this was when I was just trying to do a background image rather than an image nested in the floating image. We'll take a look at that later. So this is the floating image here. Let's actually take a look at if we comment this out. Yeah. My point exactly. I never check or clean my code before making a video. Let's move on though. We actually want to hide this. So we'll just give it an opacity of 0.1 so that we know it's there, but we don't care about it right now. Let's work on the lines though. This is where it gets a bit tricky, but if you follow along, you should be fine. We're gonna set the line height to 1 pixel, and then the width will be set to 100%. Our background will be set to a color of black, not bulk, black. Black. Then our margin bottom is going to be 0.8 rem. Our position will be set to relative. Then we're going to have a display of flex, and we're going to align items to center. Now I'm going to create the different kinds of classes that we can provide our line, and then we'll see how that turns out here in a second when I show you. So we'll use an ampersand and add flex-0. So if the line also has a flex class name of flex0, or has a class name of flex0, what we're doing is setting flex to 0. And I am using a pseudo element, an after pseudo element for these circles. So we have this circle, this circle, this circle, this circle. These are all after pseudo classes or pseudo elements, which means that if we want to hide or set flex 0, we also need to hide that after pseudo element. So I'll say after, and I'll say display none. What I'll do next is use an ampersand of flex dash 1. This will receive a flex of 1. So you're kind of seeing the idea here. I'll copy these 2 more times and I'll pass in 2. It'll be flex 2, and I'll say 3. This will be flex 3. All right, perfect. What we can do next is actually work on that after pseudo element. And to do that, what we'll say is if we have the, I'm trying to think. Okay, I got it now. So if we have an after, we'll go ahead and build this, and then we'll adjust depending on the left and the right. Because if we take a look here, we do have on the right ones, it's supposed to be on the left one's supposed to be right. So we could adjust that. But if we took a look at what we have now, you can see that it is, both on the same page here. But we'll fix that. So for our after pseudo element, we'll do a constant of empty parentheses, set the position, set the position to absolute. Our height will be 6 pixels. Our width will be 6 pixels. The border radius is going to be set to 100%. And then for our background color, we'll go ahead and give it a background color of black. What I also want to do is for our right element, it's going to be positioned, or our left element is going to be positioned on the left. So I will say the following. So I'll say if the line has a class name of left, we will say the after pseudo element will be a right of 0. Perfect. Let's go ahead and save that. And we can take a look now. So you can see that we do have these dots working for us perfectly. The first line doesn't have a line on the left, which means we need to set the line on the left to have a flex of 0, and we'll do that right now. We do have a mask, but we'll worry about that later. Let's go back in our layout.js, in our menu.js, and for our line left, since this is our first one, we'll pass in a flex of 0, and then we'll take a look. Perfect. So you can see that it is now hiding that left element, but then we still have this dot, which means we need to fix that. If we scroll to the top, we'll say we have a flex 0, and then inside the flex 0, we have an after pseudo element with display none. Okay, so I realized I messed up because it's supposed to be a semicolon rather than a dot, and then now it should fix. One thing I'm a bit confused about, which I think I made a mistake, is why is Air Max 90 being wrapped versus here it isn't? So let's actually take a look at that. Okay, so after quick debugging, the reason why this is being wrapped is because we haven't defined a flex for our right, which means that we need to pass in a flex of 1 here, and then this will allow us to fix that. So we have flex 0, flex 1. If we wanted to, change the positioning, we'll say flex 1 on the left and flex 1 on the right. This will center and equal out the widths on both ends. If we say we want the left one to be larger, we'll say flex 2 while still having flex 1 here. And finally, if we say flex 0 on the right, this will just push it to the far right. Okay, so it's really up to you on how you want to lay it out. The final mock or the final demo that we have it laid out far left, and then on the right is 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and adjust that. We'll say a flex of 0 on the left and a flex of 1 on the right, and this will push it far right. Perfect. So we've got that laid out. What I'm going to do next is loop in the data so that we can have all of our list items, and then just pass them down through our props and create our own list component. So let's do that next. What we can do is jump back in our project, and then at the very top, let's go ahead and bring in the data. So we can say the following. We can import, we'll just say data from .data / products.json. And if we scroll down to where our list starts happening, so we want to take list out here. We want to take this off, and we want to create a different component for our list. So we'll say const list, I forgot how to, I'm completely blanking. So we're gonna say const list and then create a React component and just return a single list. And then now in this list, we'll return it back in our unordered list, but then looping through our data. So we'll say data.map and we'll just say list here, and then we'll return the following. So we'll return list, and we also need to pass it a key, right? So we'll say key, and for now we can just say an index, which means that we need to return list index here. So now what should happen is we're going to display list 4 times because that's how many endpoints we have or data points we have. But it's going to be all the same data. We'll switch out the data here in a second. So you'll see we have air max, air max, air max, air max, and everything just looks the same, but here's where we're going to start changing that out. So back in our project, we can carry on. Now this list parameter represents a single data point that we have in our data.json. We can open that up. So command B, let's go to data products.json. And we don't necessarily need index here. We can just say list.id and this will return a number. Or we could say, you know, list ID returns the path. We can say anything as long as it's unique and different. So you can see if we break this down a little, we have the title, the ID. We also have line left flex and right line flex. And what this is determining what the flex should be on each individual one. We also have thumbnail position as well as offset for our, additional offset for our hover. So you can see that we also have, from the right, we have 200 or 300 pixels. From the left, we have 300 pixels, 600. So it all depends. So let's go back here. And then we have our source, which is our image source. Let's go back to menu.js though. What we're gonna pass our list is several props. So the very first thing we're going to pass is the title. So we'll pass title, and title will equal list.title. Now to use title, we'll use destructuring to bring in title. And then for our title here, we'll just replace it with title. And then boom, you'll see it all gets updated. Air Max, New Balance, Air Max, easy. So we're gonna do that for the rest of the dynamic data that we have, such as the offset and the source and the ID and the thumbnail position. So for now, we'll say source to bring in source. So list.source, and source is going to replace this here. So we'll just say source. Now this will update all of the images to match the correct shoe. And I'm actually going to hide or set the opacity of floating image to 0 because I just don't want to see it right now. So floating image will be set to 0. And then let's go back to menu.js. One thing I also want to pass is the alignments of the the number regarding our flex for our lines. So we'll say left line flex is equal to line.left line flex. Okay, and so left line flex will then be determined here, which means that we need to use template literals for this class name. So I'm going to copy everything I have here, put some brackets, template literals, get rid of the quotations. And then for our number, since we're only returning a number, if we go to product.json, we're returning right flex is 1, left flex is 0, 3, 1, 1, 3. We'll just return that. So here we'll say $, and then we'll pass in left line flex. Don't forget that you also need to bring in left line flex here. We'll do the exact same thing for right line flex as well. So just bring in right line flex, and then in the props that we're passing down to list, make sure we bring in right line flex as well. Oopsie. Right line flex is equal to line.rightLineFlex, and then all the way at the bottom here, I'm actually going to copy what we have, so I don't need to just write it again. I'll replace the class name of the right class and then just update the left to the right. So line right flex will be your right line flex. Now this will update all the lines. So I did get an issue. Line is not defined. What is line? I put line dot, which should be list dot. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so now you can see that the flex is being added to all of the following, and let's check if it matches. It does match perfectly. We need to work on the images. So the images have their own position that we also have in the data. So in the product JSON, we have thumbnail position. So let's bring in thumbnail position. We can say thumbnail position is equal to list.thumbnail position. And then we also need to destructure for thumbnail position. And then for thumbnail position here, we do have thumbnail. And what we could do here is just write an inline style prop. So we'll say left is set to thumbnail position. And then this will sort out where we display our images. You can always edit this to your liking in the data. So products.json, if we want the thumbnail position of the first image to be 400, you'll see that it just moves closer to Air Max 90. But this is all to your liking. This is all preference. So you can always edit that if you want. In our link, we do have product/A. We need to change this so that it could take us directly to the path, which the path does represent the ID. So what we could do here is we're saying, I mean, we could say path, right? Yeah, I'm thinking, or ID. We'll just say ID is set to list.id, and then we'll pass in ID here, which means that we'll then use $ID for our product. So now if we click New Balance, it will change the path to New Balance. Off-White will change the path to Off-White. Air Max 90, easy. But the menu's not going away, so we can't actually tell if it's going, but that's where we'll adjust that in terms of turning the menu on and off, turning the menu on and off. So it won't have any animations just yet, but we'll adjust that in a second. So we've got the Air Max 90, New Balance X90, we've got the titles, we've got the layout set, we've got the images, and then we also have the thumbnail, the floating image added as well. So that is all taken care of in terms of the look. Now to toggle this on and off, what we'll do is switch gears to our layout.js. And inside layout.js, we're going to house the state of our menu. What we'll do is we'll need to bring in use state, and then we'll do the following. So we'll say const menu state, and then we'll say set menu state. This will equal to use state, and we'll set that to false. So initially, menu state will be set to false, meaning it's not opened. Now to open and close the state, we need to pass the state or the set menu state as props both to our header and both to our menu, because with our menu, we can close it. With our header, we can open the menu since they're two different screens or two different components. For our menu, we'll go ahead and pass set menu state, as well as passing menu state. All right, now let's go back to menu.js. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap the entire menu sort of with a ternary operator, letting us know that if menu state is true, we want to display this component. If menu state is false, we want to unmount this component. Now we can access the state using destructuring. So we have menu state and we also have set menu state. And now what we can do is copy everything in this div here. And then we'll use a React fragment. And then we'll say the following. So we'll say the following. So menu state. And since we don't want a ternary operator, we'll just do and, which is, if it's true, display this. Since we don't have an else, you'll typically use ternary operators if you have an else. So if you have like an if else statement, but we don't want to display anything else. We just want to unmount it completely. And then we'll add parentheses and display this. So now it should hide because menu state is false. You can see that it does hide here. If we change the layout.js menu state right here to true, that will then be true, and then it will display our menu. We'll set it to false for now. And if we go back to layout.js, let's focus on opening up this menu. We only need to pass set menu state as a prop for our header because we don't care about the state of the current menu. If we open up header.js, we can then bring in the set menu state, like so. And what we'll do is we'll run an on-click event handler on the Hamburger menu, which will then toggle the state. So inside the Hamburger menu, we'll say on-click, and this will set menu state to the opposite of what menu state is. So since the default is false, it should ultimately always be true, opening up the Hamburger menu. If we take a look now, you can see that we do get errors, which we're infamous for. And it does say an error, menu state is not defined. Where are we saying? Oh, menu state here. Okay, so I did lie to you guys. We do need menu state. So I wonder if it works. Okay, that's cool. It did work, but we didn't pass menu state as a prop, which is weird, but we'll pass it anyway. Ultimately, we can get away. So now if we click on it, it turns true and it opens up the menu. But ultimately, we could also get away, since we do have two different on-clicks. We could just get away with not necessarily the opposite, which this represents like a toggle, right? You're toggling true, false, true, false, true, false. Here, we can just say true, and it will just turn it on. And then if we close or click the X button, it will set to false. So you really have two options. I'll leave it as true until we adjust it, and then I'll go back to the opposite. But it's really up to you. So one thing I want to do next is when we click on the X button, I want to hide the menu. This is in our menu.js. So what I'll do is look for that X button. So we have close. So I'll also write an on click here. On click will run the following: set menu state to false. Oops, false. So now if I click on the hamburger menu, it opens. Click on the X, it'll close. Pretty simple stuff, right? Nothing special. Again, you could use the opposite, which means that this will be the opposite. And then in our header, this will also be the opposite. So right now it is false. Toggling will set the opposite true. Toggling again will set the opposite, which is false. All right, if we refresh, make sure everything is working, everything is good. It's up to you. Typically, you want to use this opposite when you're clicking on the same button, meaning if this also toggled close. So a lot of sites out there, what they'll do is just animate this hamburger menu into an X icon, and then you can close. But for us, we are using a different X button. Up to you. Do you, boo boo? Do you? So last thing what I'm gonna cover before we start jumping into all the cool stuff is when I open the menu, I select New Balance X90. I want the menu to hide. So how do we determine the menu should hide? What we're gonna do is use a use effect hook, which will only run when the location has changed in the route. That will be located inside of our header. And so you can actually put it anywhere, but I'll put it in the header. What I'll do is the following. So in Gatsby, they do in fact use reach router. And then what we could do with the reach router is use a use location hook, which will determine the current location or the current page you're on. So we'll say from at reach router. Now to use the use location, we'll just say const location is equal to use location, and then we'll use our use effect. So use effect, and then we'll also need to bring in use effect from React. I don't like when something is above my React imports. It makes me mad. So in the use effect, we don't need a cleanup. Our dependency is going to be location. So when location changes, we're going to run whatever is in this use effect. And what this use effect is going to do is set the menu state to false, meaning that it's going to close our hamburger menu. So if we take a look now, we are on the New Balance X90 product page. We click on the hamburger menu. We want to switch to the Air Max 90 page. We are suddenly switched to the Air Max 90 page. We want to go to the UZ700. It will switch. Perfect. So that's going to really do it for functionality based, right? Making this work. But here's where we're going to take it from it looking like a 5.5 to an absolute 10, which, is the animation part, which is what you're all looking forward to. So let's actually start that. What we're doing is we're going to animate the menu, right? We're going to animate the menu to this effect. We'll then add these panels that you see, and then we'll finally top it off with adding the hover effects, such as the floating image and this custom cursor that only shows when you're hovering on something. So it doesn't display when you're not hovering on a link, but then it only displays when you're hovering on things you can actually toggle, which is pretty neat. So let's actually go ahead and get started on that in the next section. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going to start animating the hamburger menu. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and animate the actual menu itself, and then we'll add a panels effect that you had seen earlier. If we take a look real quick, the panels effect that I'm mentioning is what you see right now, when it goes from the left and right, up and down type of thing. And then we'll create the mass position hook as well as add the custom cursor and floating image effect. So let's first do the effect in terms of animating the menu, what you see here when the menus start animating. So let's go ahead and do that. We can close the menu and open the menu, but there's no cool animations. So let's close it. And to get started, we'll start in the menu JS. We'll close product.json. We can close layout.js, header.js, as well as the menu sass file. Working strictly in the menu.js, what we're going to do first is import Framer Motion. So we're going to import two things. We're going to import motion as well as animate presence. If you don't know too much about Framer Motion, I do recommend you go watch my older or previous videos. This topic gets a bit more advanced here, so check that out if you want to learn kind of more about basic Framer Motion stuff. But I'm not going to spend too much time teaching here because we are we're reaching a point where it's just a really long video. So the first thing I want to do is I want to wrap the entire menu state with the animate presence, or the menu itself with animate presence. What this will allow us to do is add some exit animations for when our component of this product div unmounts. So I will copy everything that's in this menu state. Let's go ahead and copy that. And then I will add an animate presence, and inside animate presence as its child, I will then add this products div. If I save this and take a look at what happens, you'll see that if we click on the menu, it does open. And if we exit on it, it does not close the menu. That's because we haven't defined an exit animation. To create a very subtle exit animation, I will wrap the parent, which is a product, with a motion.div, which will turn this product into a motion component. And then I will pass it an exit prop. This exit prop is just going to set the opacity to 0. If we take a look now, if we open up our menu, it will open up. And if I click X, it will then fade it out. So you can see it has a very subtle opacity or fade out effect, which is very, very easy to create, but it isn't all that appealing to us. I'll go ahead and leave this exit as an opacity of 0 just so that we can get rid of the hamburger menu. What we'll do next is give this UL on ordered list a motion, a motion.ul, which will turn it into a motion component. The props we're passing here are as following. So we'll pass variance. And now variance allows us to extract the animations into its own variables, and then we can kind of define different states for them. We're going to keep the same states that Framer Motion provides, which is initial, which means the initial state of your animation, animate, which represents the current motion or animation, and then exit, which defines when you're unmounting the animation. So I'll leave variance as empty for now until we build it, and then we're going to pass initial. And we'll say initial will equal initial, if I just know how to spell initial. Animate will be set to animate. And then exits will be set to exit. We aren't really using exit props here for our animations, except for the panels. So if you see that if we click on the exit, nothing happens to our menu itself. It stays the same, but it just goes away once the panels have reached that middle point of covering the entire screen. Let's go back because we do have an error, and the error is regarding our variance. So the variant we're going to make is we want to create a staggering effect for our children, which means that when we click on the menu, we want each animation to run one after the other and not all at the same time. I'll get to the variance part in a second in terms of adding staggering, but for now we'll just leave it as commented. And then we'll jump down to our list component. And then we'll start animating here. We'll turn this li into a motion component. The very first animation we'll do is for our titles. So if we look for our H2, we can find it right here. We're going to animate the text itself. So we'll say this div right here is going to be a motion.div. And then for this animation, what we're going to do is just have it slide up. So we'll give it a variance, and we'll call this title slide up. Now to define variance, what we could do is scroll to the very top and then create a section dedicated to our variance. Also want to make a static or a default transition. And so this transition is going to have a custom duration as well as an ease. So we'll say transition, and we'll call this const transition, is equal to the following. So as a default, we'll say the duration will always be 0.8, and then we'll set the ease to the following. So you can add custom easings in Framer Motion, which is really neat. The custom easing we are adding is a 0.6, a negative 0.5, a 0.01, and a 0.9. And we'll reuse this transition across all of our animations, or most of our animations. So like I mentioned, the first variant we'll create is for the title. So we'll call this const title slide up. And now const title slide up, or title slide up, is going to have an initial set to a Y of 200 pixels, which means it will push it down 200 pixels. And then our animate will be set to a Y of 0, which is its default position. We can take title slide up, go all the way down, and pass it here. We're already passing it here, so let's take a look at what happens when we open up the menu. So you can see all the text just kind of whoop, flies in. Now I'm not the biggest fan of Framer Motion's default easing, so what you could do is pass transition, and then just pass transition here, like so. So now when we open up the menu, you can see it's a lot smoother for how the text appears. Like I mentioned before, in terms of the staggering effect, we need to add that to the parent of our list items, which means it will be our UL. We'll uncomment this variant, and then we'll pass parent here for this variant. So we'll go all the way to the top, and we'll create a const parent. And all we need to define for our parent is our animate prop. We'll say transition is set to a stagger children of 0.1. And then we want to delay the children from animating for 1 second. So they won't start animating until a second has passed from when we've opened up our menu. So if we go back to our project now, we'll click on it, and then 1 second later, it will all fade up and in. Perfect. And you can see it does have a delay, so it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. We can increase delay if we want. We can set it to 0.6, but this, or not the delay, but we can increase the stagger, which will take 0.6 seconds off of each individual one from animating. We don't want that. We kind of want it a bit smoother. 0.1 is our perfect number. So if we scroll down, we'll start animating the lines, so we can get these lines working, and then we'll work on the images as well. Now, if we go to our lines real quick, you can see that we do have a mask, which I never really talked about, or I did mention, but we haven't started on them. So what I'm gonna do is uncomment these masks, and then we'll jump into our menu sass real quick. So let's save that, uncomment the mask, save that, and then go to menu sass. And if we look for our line, we can then add that mask class, or create the mask class. We can set the background here to a background color of pink. And we're using pink just for demonstration purposes. We're going to make them white, but we want to see how they look, right? We want to make sure that they're actually covering our lines. We'll set the width to 100%. We'll set the height to 6 pixels. We'll set the Z index to 9. And then we'll give them a position of absolute. Let's save that and take a look. If we open up the menu, you can see that we are covering the lines, but only on the left ones. If we go ahead and add a right class, so if our mask also has a right class, we'll set the right to 0, which will then move the ones to the right. It didn't do that, and I wonder if we jump into menu.js and look, yeah, so right here it didn't, we didn't comment out this mask for our right, so make sure we comment that out. And we already have a right class on our right mask, which now if we open up the menu should cover all of them up. Perfect. Now we want to change this back to a background color of white. What did I have? Yeah, white. And then we'll animate the menu, or we'll animate the masks to change the widths. So to do that, we'll jump back into menu.js. We'll start with the left first, and then we'll worry about the right after. So with the left, if we select this div mask, we'll turn this to a motion component. I can't get that thing right. Motion.div, and then for our variants, we'll pass this a, what should we call this? We'll just say mask any, or mask animation. We'll also give the mask animation to the motion, or the right one, after we complete this though. Let's create this mask animation. Let's scroll to the top, and then we'll say const mask animation is set to the following. So initial, this will be set to a width of 100%. And then our animate is going to get a width set to 0. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And there's an error. I need to make sure I add comments from when I'm using percentages. So make sure, not a comment, sorry, but a parentheses. Make sure you add parentheses. So we'll save that. And then if we take a look now and click on the menu, you can see that it did reveal it, but it was a bit off in the easing and the duration. And we'll fix that here in a second. So what we could do is scroll back down to the mask animation, and then we'll pass a transition. And for this transition, what we're going to do is the following. Now we want to use the default transition that we have defined up at the top here, but we want to increase the duration. And we can do that by just using that spread operator. We'll do dot transition. This will bring in the values or the properties of transition that we defined, but we can edit it or add to it by adding a duration of 1. Now if we take a look, perfect. So the lefts are all animating. Let's do the exact same thing that we did for our right. We'll scroll down, we'll turn this mask right to a motion component, and then we'll pass the exact same props that we did for the left. So we'll pass variance, mask animation, and the transition. Let's go back in our project, open up the menu, and you can see that is animating perfectly now. One thing that we'll get to the hover effects later, but now let's work on the thumbnails. So let's look for the thumbnail, which is right here. And now the thumbnail is going to be pretty much the exact same thing that we did for the lines. We're going to turn this mask to the variance and the transition, but we need to actually style this mask. So let's look for thumbnail. Right here, we do have this mask class, but we haven't styled it. Let's style it to where we create a white box that covers the image. So again, we'll give it a background color of pink just so that we know that it's covering completely. We'll give a width of 100%, a height of 100%, a position of absolute, and a top of 0. Let's go back in our project, and now you can see that pink box is covering all of our images. We'll turn this to a background of white, and then we will add that animation of that mask animation that we created earlier. So honestly, I'm going to copy and paste what we have. Make sure you turn this mask to a motion.div, and then pass in the variance for mask animation, as well as that custom transition. Let's go back in our project, and when we click on the Hamburger menu, you can see that it's all animating perfectly now. Awesome. Let's do it one more time. Perfect. What I want to focus on next is creating those panels, the ones you see here. So if we close, you can see the panels come up, reveal the page, panels come up, reveal the menu. So let's actually work on that next. Let's go back in our original project here. Let's make sure that it's working in terms of the links too. So if we select easy, it'll just fade into this page. Cool. Okay, let's do the panels. Panels is going to be its own separate component. So we'll do const panels, and we will return the following. Now this gets a bit tricky, but the way this is built is honestly pretty cool. For our panels, we'll use a React fragment, and then inside the React fragment, we'll create a div with the class name of left-panel-background, and we will copy and paste and switch this to right panel background. Let's go ahead and grab this panels component, and we're going to want to render this panels component in our menu. So the panels component will live as a sibling to the products, which means that we can just drop it right here. Oops, drop it right here. But we're going to get an error because in React you cannot have siblings for when you return that component. So we're going to need to use a React fragment here and then drop that. And looking at this, I don't think we need a React fragment above the animate presence since we're using it here. So now we are returning the panels, but they don't display anything because we haven't animated them just yet. So let's actually work on that. If we go to menu SAS, scroll all the way to the bottom, let's actually work on the panels. We'll say .left -panel -background. We'll set the height to 100 viewport height, and we'll set the width to 50 viewport height, or viewport width actually. We'll give both of them a position of absolute as well as a Z index of 11. And then I will want the exact same thing for my right -panel background. The only thing that's different is on the right panel background, it's going to be a right of 0. So let's make sure we add that. Go ahead and click that like so. And then if we view, nothing happens. What we need to do is actually set a background color to pink, and nothing actually happens. And I wonder why we can't see the panels. Let's check out the elements. So we've got our main. Do I need to open the menu? Okay, yeah, that's why. So it isn't actually mounted. It's only mounted when the menu is clicked. So we have our panel. We could do right panel of a background of light blue. Not lightness, light blue. So the right is light blue, pink. Perfect. We aren't going to specify the background color here. We'll specify it when we turn these into a motion component. So here is the trick on how this works. What we'll do is work on the left panel first. Actually, let's leave a background color because the background color is different. So you'll notice when we open the hamburger menu, this color is a bit purplish, and when we close it, the color is greenish. They aren't separate divs in terms of open and a close. They are the exact same. It's just we have state that determines if we're opening or closing, and it results in changing the color of the background of the panels. For now, we'll leave it as a blue and pink just so that we can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and turn the left one to a motion div, and let's create that animation. Our initial will be set to a height of 0. Then our animate is going to be set to the following. So what we'll do is we'll set height to an array, and then we'll say 0, and then pass it window.innerHeight, and then we'll set it back to 0. Now let me explain what this is real quick, because I don't think we've seen this before in the past. This is a way to use keyframes in Framer Motion. So what we'll do is, what we want the what is it called? What we want this to look like is we have, if I open it, we have the height goes up to 100%, and then the height goes back down to 0. If we close again, you can see height 100% and then back down to 0. And so when we reach 100%, that reaches the middle way or halfway point of our animation. And then when we start animating to set the height back to 0, that's when we change the height of the panel back to 0 towards the end of the animation. So again, right here, we're starting at 0. Once we reach the halfway point, which is 0.5 of our animation, it's going to set the height to 100%, or the height of our inner height, and then it'll set it back to 0. Okay, so we also want to change the bottom. And now what bottom is where it was positioned in terms of it being positioned absolute, whether it's top, bottom, left, right. The animation for our left panel, you can see it's starting at the top. Oops, not that one. It's starting at the top and then going to bottom. So what this means is if we have bottom here, what we're gonna do is first set the bottom to null. And then once we reach that middle way point, we want to change the bottom to have a 0, and then we can just set 0 at the end. So let's actually take a look at what it looks like now. When I open up the products, you'll notice what it did for the left one. It's really quick, and that's because the transition isn't added. So let me add custom transitions. I'm going to copy what we did for the line right, and I'll pass it in for our left. I will only change the duration to a duration of 2. And then we also need to pass in times. And it tells us what the definition of times is. So in animating keyframes, times can be used to determine where in animation each keyframe is reached. Each value in times is a value between 0 and 1, representing the duration. So this is kind of specifying where kind of like our timestamps should be. So we'll start at 0. Once we hit 0.5, that's our middle waypoint, and then 1 is our ending. So we'll take a look here, right? The way Framer Motion kind of defines keyframes and a lot of its motion values is through ranges using these arrays. So we have the beginning, which is 0. So initially we're at 0. You can see our height is at 0 as well. Once we reach that halfway point of our animation, which is 0.5, we'll set the height to 100% or window inner height. And then our final, once we've reached the end of our animation, which is 1 second, we'll reach back down to 0. So if we take a look now and open up our menu, look at the pink panel. It will go up height 100%, reach that halfway point, and then set the height back down to 0. Now this bottom part, let me delete this to show you what happens if we don't define the bottom. What's going to happen is that the panel should just reach 100% and then go back to 0. So you'll see it reaches 100 and then go back to the 0 from the top. That's why we're adding that bottom. So once we reach that halfway point, we set the bottom to 0, making this position absolute element set back to 0. It's kind of like defining the origin. You can switch the origin from top, bottom, left, right. But since we're using position absolute elements, we'll use the bottom 0, which will reveal it like so. Okay, perfect. Next, we need to look at how our exit animation is going to work for our left panel. So if we look here, I can't actually close this. Let me comment out the right panel background. So if I open it, it animates like so. And then if I close it, it's just going to fade out. But what I want it to do is this right here. If you look at our final project, it will go back to the top. So it starts at the top, going bottom. And then when we close, it goes from bottom to top. All right. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll take exactly what we have for animate, copy and paste it. We'll switch animate to exit. And then for our exit, what we're going to have is the height set to 0, window inner height 0, nothing changes there. But then we'll change this bottom, set it back to top. So now we set the top back to 0 once we reach that middle point. So let's check it out. Let's see if it works. We'll open up the menu, pink panel goes, and now when I close, pink panel should go up, which it does. Perfect. Now it did fade out. That's because we have the exit opacity of 0 here. On our motion here, but I think what we can do actually is even if we add like exits, right? There shouldn't be an animation, so it animates in, closing, animates out, and then it will close. It will only close once the animation is complete, right here. That's not how we're going to do it though. What we're going to do is I'll talk about it later. We'll talk about that exit animation later. But let's continue on. Let's do the exact same thing what we have for the left panel for our right panel. I'll copy and paste because I don't want to write everything all over again. I'll take the right panel background class name and I'll paste it in for our right. We can get rid of this comments now. Things that are changing though is the following. We're leaving transition the same. We're leaving initial the same. The animate is going to be a height of 0, window inner height 0, similar to what we had, and exactly the same for our exits. The main thing that's changing is we're switching the bottom. So for our animate, it's going to be bottom, which is going to be set to 0 because we want it to start off at that 0 position. And then once we reach the end, we want to switch this to window.inner height. And then for our exit, we'll switch this to bottom, like so. So the only thing that was switched was our exit was going to receive a bottom rather than a top. And then for our bottom, it was going to be 0, 0, window inner height rather than null 0, 0. Save that and let's take a look now. We open it up. Both panels do what they're told and then they're brought back down. Perfect. So that is one reason why I described, or we'll take a look at, that exit animation here in a second, is because when we close this, we want it to exit now. We don't want to see the menu once the panels are gone. What we have here is when we click it, we have this open, and then when we close, boom, the menu is gone. We see the page back to normal. So let's work on that. So we've got the panels working, which is perfect. Before we jump to the next section, what we're going to do is create that that background color change for the exits. This means we can get rid of the background pink and the background light blue in our styles. Get rid of that. What we'll do is we need to somehow determine some sort of state to let us know when a panel is completed. So first we'll go ahead and create a state. So we'll do const, and we'll say panel complete, and then we'll say set panel complete, and we'll say use state and set that to false. Now we only need one of these divs to do this, but there is a prop that we could pass, which calls a callback function, letting us know when an animation has completed. And this is called onAnimationComplete, which is it passes a prop, but it's a method, which allows us to run a function. Allows us to run a function here. And the function we're going to run is just updating the state to the opposite of what the current state is. So we'll just say set panel complete is the opposite of panel complete, like so. Now what this means is we could change the background color of these different panels. So we'll use a style prop, and then we'll say the background here is going to be determined based on if the panel has completed or not. So we'll say the first color is E7, E7, DE, and then the else statement will have a different color, and this color is going to be E7, DE, E7. And we'll copy this exactly and paste it in the left panel background. Go ahead and save that, and I don't know why that keeps coming up. So once you've saved it, let's take a look now. We've got an issue. Use state is not defined, and that's because we need to scroll to the top of the menu.js and import use state from the top. Let's go back down and refresh the page, or it should refresh on your own. But now when we open, we'll get that purple, and then when we close, we'll get the green. We can open again, get the purple, we can close again and get the green. Perfect. Now let's focus our efforts on making the background not so jumpy. So you can see that it's jumpy. Let's make it smooth. To do that, we'll scroll all the way to the top, and then we'll work on this exit prop. So what I'm going to do here is the following. So let's make some room for us. Initial is going to be set to a visibility of hidden. This isn't going to be an animation, it's more of just hiding the element. And then the animate will be set to the following. Visibility will be set to visible, but then it will have a delay of 1 second. So transition will be set to a delay of 1 second. I'm going to copy exactly what I have for animate and paste it, and then switch it over to exit. Now exit is just going to be set to hidden. So what's going to happen here is when we click on the menu, since we know that the menu panels take about 2 seconds to complete, we're going to get that halfway mark. So the duration is 2 seconds. The halfway mark is 1 second. So we're giving this menu 1 second of delay period before it has to hide. So if we click this now, you can see that it is way, way smoother than what we had before. And it's pretty much seamless. So the 1 second mark, which is right here, I'll call it. We click it, boom, 1 second, it hides, or it shows the menu in this case, and then boom, 1 second and it opens. So it's that halfway mark. Not very complicated to do, very, very easy to understand as well. So I actually think that's it in terms of the animation. We can then transition over to creating the hover effect. Comparing the two, I mean, they seem exactly the same. I don't think I missed anything regarding the animation. If we click on New Balance, it'll go to New Balance. Let's start working on the hover effect of our image, and then we can also work on the hover effect of the cursor. Let's go back home. Now the hover effects, we are using a custom hook. So let's go ahead and build that hook. I'll create a new folder in the source, and I'll call this hooks. And inside the hooks folder, I'll create a new file called useMousePosition.js. And this is just going to be a custom hook returning the X and the Y of the current mouse position. We're going to import use state and use effect from React. And then we're going to say export default function use mouse position. We're going to say let mouse position, and then we're set mouse position equal to use state, and we'll say X is set to null and the Y is also set to null. And then we're going to have a use effect, and this use effect hook is going to run a function that will update the state of the mouse position. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll have a function and we'll call this handle position, and we'll return an event, and then we'll say set mouse position, and this will return the following. It'll be e.pageX for our X, and then e.pageY for our Y. Actually, it'll be Y. Okay. Now, the way this function is going to run is based on the mouse move event handler. So window.add event listener, I said handler, right? It should be a listener. So window.add event listener is going to be mouse move, handle position, which will run that function, and then we'll have a return, which kind of represents our cleanup function. We'll say, I don't feel like writing anymore. I'm just gonna copy and paste. We'll say window.remove event listener rather than add. Mouse move, handle position. At the end, we're returning the mouse position. Okay, perfect. So this is going to return the X and the Y value, so we can use this hook to access X and Y. And then we're going to call this hook in one spot. You can typically call hooks in multiple spots, but since the way our site is laid out, we can call it in the layout and then pass it as props to wherever it is needed. If we jump to, I'm just blanking right now, components, layout.js, we can call this hook. At the top, I'm going to import use mouse position, and we're importing this from the hooks folder, specifically use mouse position. Now to use the use mouse position hook, all I need to do is create const, and then I can use destructuring to grab X and Y, and then is set to use mouse position. Now I could pass X and Y down as props to anywhere I want it, and then just use X and Y, rather than needing to call this mouse position hook in different areas. I'll go ahead and save this. And one thing I also want to do is I want to lock the body or prevent the body from scrolling when I have opened up the menu. So I'm getting an error, and I wonder what this error is. Input is not defined. Did I leave input here? Yeah, input is a dependency. So it's not going to be input. Frankly, it's just going to be an empty array. So go ahead and delete the input, save that, close the use mouse position. Let's take a look. Perfect, so now it's working. But one thing I was talking about is I want to stop the menu from, or prevent the menu from scrolling. And it doesn't show here, but if we click on, for example, Air Max 97 X off-white, I need something with long content body. No, that's fine. Actually, we don't even need to do that. Don't even worry about that. It was just going to set like a lock or overflow hidden on the body so that you can't scroll when the menu is opened. But to do that, all you need to do is just have a use effect that will just set the class name of body whenever the menu state is opened, which is very, very easy to do, but we don't need it here. So for us to work with these X and Y's, what I'm gonna do is pass them as props to our menu. So X here, Y, Y, and then in the menu, we can just use destructuring to bring these in, X and Y. And since we also have children, or the list is a child, this means that we're going to need to pass X and Y here again. So it's kind of like 3-level nesting. X, X, Y, Y, like so. And then we can finally use X and Y within this list. All right, perfect. So if we look forward to, or if we look for the floating image, what we'll need to do here is set this as a motion component. Yikes. Motion.div. And let's create some room for us to work. What I'm going to do for the floating image is set the initial to an opacity of 0. And we've already done that earlier here in the CSS, but let's go ahead and get rid of that actually. So floating image, we can get rid of this stuff. We can get rid of this opacity. We'll just comment it out for now. If we look at our project, open up the menu. Okay, so the initial is set to opacity of 0, which is what we want. Let's go back here, and then let's create some more room for us to work. We'll set an animate to the following. So we'll set the opacity to 1, and this is going to change depending on if we've hovered on our title, which means we need to create new state called hover state to trigger if we have hovered on the title or not, which we'll do here in a second. But I'm going to set the X to X, and then set the Y to Y. Perfect. So before we actually take a look, let's work on this opacity. We talked about hover state, right? What I'm going to do in our list is create a new state called hover state. So const hover state, and we'll set hover state, and we'll say use state, and we'll say hover state is set to false. But then when we animate or when we hover on this, we'll say opacity is determined by the hover state. If it's not hovered, we're setting the opacity to 0. Let's take a look now. If we open up the menu, this opens up, and if we hover on Air Max 90, it should display the floating image, but it's not. And let's try to figure out why that is. So let's go back to our project real quick. If we get rid of this initial opacity 0, let's see what's happening. Okay, let's open up the inspect elements, and let's look for one of the floating images, which is right here. Opacity is set to 0, which we don't want it set to 0. Okay, I understand what's going on. So the reason it's not working is because hover state is already set to 0 because it's not true. And the only way for hover state to be true is if we hover on the title, which means in the title here, we will grab the parent div right here. So in the title, what it's going to do is the following. So on hover start, and we actually need to turn this title class name to a motion component, so motion.div. So on hover start, it is going to set the set hover state to true. And then what we can also do is just copy and paste this again, and then we can say on hover end and set the state to false. So now let's take a look. If we open up the menu and hover on Air Max 90, it hovers and it shows the following images. Perfect. Now it is positioned oddly, and the reason it is positioned oddly is because this is referring to the parent, which means the parent of this is the menu, which means if I set the top left, it's only going to reach here, and it's not going to be 100% precise to where the mouse lives. This only works if the component or this product image is a parent itself outside of the scope of this menu. So this menu is reaching the limit, which means if I add 600, it's going to be pushed down further to the bottom right or bottom left or wherever we position it. To make up for this though, what I did add was a new state that can kind of push it to the right and align it correctly, which means if we do the following, what we'll do is we'll create a ref. We'll scroll to the top and we'll use a use ref, and then we are going to, for our li, use ref and call this list. So I need to do some math here. I need to get where this element or each element is positioned, and then subtract it from the top and the left of whatever these numbers are, and we'll use that by the get bounding element or get bounding rect, which will determine the top and the left, and then we'll subtract it so that we can fix the positioning here. So to do that, what we're going to do is create new state. So const, and we'll just call this list position, and then we'll say set list position. Now this is going to be use state and the following. So top will be set to 0, left will be set to 0. And then we'll have a use effect that will run the following. So this use effect is going to set list position to the following. So top will be list.current, which we're referring to this li element, .get bounding client rect.top, and we'll copy and paste this one more time, except we'll switch top to left. And this is going to generate based on the hover state. So when we've hovered, we're going to update the current state because we only want to show where pretty much, or the element that's being hovered on. So we don't want this to always run every single time, only when we've hovered. Okay, perfect. So this means that when we scroll back down to this X here, we need to do some math. So we're going to do X minus state dot left for X and Y minus state dot top. Now, if we save this and take a look at what happened, use effect is not defined. Pretty. We need to import use effect, as well as the fact that I had forgotten to use ref. I assigned the ref, but I just didn't create it. To create the ref, we'll say const or let list equal use ref, like so. Oops. Yes, like so. State is not defined. What's going on? Oh, sorry. I am being sloppy right now. So it's not Y, or it's not X and Y minus state dot. It's list position dot left, list position dot top, because this is what our state is currently called. So now if we open up the menu and we hover on air max, you can see that now it's perfectly positioned where our mouse is. But I do want to add some offset. What offset is kind of representing to is, you know, that position to the right. I want to move it a little to the right and or a little to the left. And this is coming from directly, it's coming directly from the data. I do have this thumbnail position, and thumbnail position, which determines the offset. So to do the offset, it's only going to be applied to our X. I'll just say plus offset. Now offset isn't being called anywhere, and that is because we need to bring in offset through the destructuring, and then in our list, we need to say offset is equal to list.offset. And now when we hover, it's right there, exactly where you want it. So you can see that with the mouse, there's this weird easing to the images, very spring-like, and we can just adjust that. We can go down to our animation here and then pass transition. And we can say the ease is just going to be linear. And this helps it to be a bit more smoother. So when we hover now, it's just a lot smoother. Nice. Let's go ahead and add the following. When we hover on the title, I am giving it an outline. For example, it goes to like an outline, which is very easy to do, right? We just go to title in the CSS or the SAS. So right here, what we're doing is a hover. So we'll say ampersand hover, and then we're going to say WebKit dash text dash fill dash color will be set to white, and then we'll do the exact same thing for the other. So WebKit dash text dash stroke dash width to 1 pixel, and then WebKit dash text dash stroke dash color is going to be set to black. And this is only when we hover. So let's take a look. And you can see that now it has that outline for when we hover. The final thing we're gonna do is add that custom cursor effect. Let's go ahead and work on that next. Let's just make sure everything's looking good when we click the menu. Air max 90. Beautiful. I love this animation. So let's close out a menu, or SCSS, and then let's work on the cursor. So the cursor is going to live in our layout.js. let's go ahead and build the cursor, and then we can add the custom animations to it. We'll say dot cursor, and we'll leave it like so. Let's go ahead and work on the styles first. We can open up app.js, scroll to the bottom, and do a dot cursor. Now the cursor is going to receive a cursor pointer, a height of 2.5 rem, a width of 2.5 rem, a position of absolute, a z-index set to 10, a top set to 0, a background color of E7, DEDE. Our border radius is going to be 100%. And for our pointer events, we're going to set that to a pointer events of none. So if we take a look at our project, you can see that the cursor is up here on the top left. We just need to assign it the X and the Y so that it follows us around. Let's go to menu.js real quick, or no, layout.js. And then for our cursor, we'll turn this into a motion component, so motion.div. Next, we'll set an animate, and we'll give it an X of X and a Y of Y. And let's also give it a transition. So the transition is going to be similar to our images. So it's going to be transition set to ease of linear. And now motion is not defined. So we need to define motion within our layout. So import motion from framer-motion. Okay, so now we have the cursor following us around. Neat. So we need to define duration just because it's kind of slow. We'll say duration 0.2. Okay, so it's a little quicker now, but we only want this to show only when we've hovered on an element. All right, so let's do that actually. This means we need to define state for our cursor, which means we can copy exactly our menu state, except that we'll just turn this to cursor, cursor hovered, and we'll say set cursor hovered. By default, it's going to be false. Now we need to pass set cursor hovered to our different components. Let's work with the header first. So set cursor hovered will be set cursor hovered. Let's open up our header and let's bring in set cursor hovered. And what we'll do is we want the set cursor hover to be true when we've hovered on our hamburger menu, which means we'll just use the on mouse enter, and all on mouse enter is going to do is set cursor hovered to true. And I did something wrong here. Forgot to add curly brackets. And then we can copy and paste this and say on mouse exit or on mouse leave and set the set cursor hovered to false. Back in our layout.js, what we'll do is we'll grab cursor hovered and we'll do two things. We'll do, actually one sec. So you can see the position of this mouse or the position of the circle isn't correctly centered with the mouse. And that's because we need to subtract 16. So now if we take a look. And the reason why we need to subtract 16 is because the height and the width is 2 rem, which means 1 rem is 16, 2 rem is 32, minus 16 centers it. So that's where I got 16 from. And we've got 2 rem from, or it's 2.5 rem. 16, 32, 24. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's centered enough. Who cares? Next, we're going to do scale. So we're going to do the scale to where if cursor hovered is true, we're setting the scale to 1.2. If not, we're setting the scale back to 1. So let's take a look. So when I hover on the hamburger menu, it should expand the cursor. So you can see that it does expand. If you can't tell, we can blow this bitch up. We'll do 6. Look at that. Beautiful. We're gonna set it back to 1.2. We're gonna also edit the opacity. We'll set the opacity to 0.8. And if we haven't hovered on anything, it's going to be 0. So cursor does not exist unless we hover on something clickable. Now you don't see this on too many sites. You usually see the cursor always available, but I do like this. I don't know. Something about this, I do like it a lot. So that's how you do the cursor effect. The only thing we need to do left is replicate that effect on anything that is clickable. And to do that, we can open up our menu. Or before we jump into our menu, we need to pass the set cursor hovered into our menu. Open your menu, go all the way to the top, and then bring in set cursor hovered. And then we need to pass set cursor hovered as a prop to our list. And then make sure we bring set cursor hovered in our list. And then in our, title? We'll do title. We'll copy exactly what we did for our hamburger menu. So on mouse enter, on mouse leave. Paste that in. And now let's take a look if it works. So click here. Perfect. So you can see the cursor is available every time we hover on a link, and it will close. Beautiful. You can do the exact same thing for the close button. We'll pass the following on the close button. So when we open this, makes the animation, hover, 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 and then you want to close, you can close it. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's going to wrap up this entire video. This was a pretty long video, but if you did enjoy, please leave a like, don't forget to subscribe. If I missed anything, I don't think I did. If you look at the final project, they look the exact same. Yeah, nothing missed. But yeah, if you did enjoy it, please leave a like, don't forget to subscribe. Have a wonderful day, guys. Look out for the next episode in the next week or something. But yeah, take care. Have a wonderful day.